Welcome one, welcome all to SimSpeed TV. Thank you very much, David Haynes, for the introduction and your duties live in room 360 at the Queensland University of Technology. We're here at Mount Panorama for the Motorsport Australia Queensland Esports State Championships, the first event of its kind in Australia. I'm Reese Gardner. Dan Yeaman alongside me in the commentary box, of course, Jay Kennedy on site handling production. This is going to be a fantastic event. We've got quarterfinals, semi-finals, and a grand final to come where competitors will be competing for over $2,000 worth of prizes here today with representatives from Next Level Racing and the Queensland University of Technology themselves. Dan, I've been looking forward to this event for quite some time. Fantastic car, the Ferrari 488 GT3 these guys are competing in, and of course, the best track in the world.
Indeed, nothing like a little bit of patriotic fervour when it comes to our circuit here at Mount Panorama. We zoom on in with the Google Earth view from the country down towards New South Wales and a couple of hours outside the capital of Sydney as you head inland to the city of Bathurst, and then down from there itself to Mount Panorama on the hill. And yeah, a fantastic circuit which is now etched into not just national law, Reese, but international history and law in motorsport, and a circuit that has stood the test of time with very few changes, namely, of course, the chase being that big update to bring things in line for modern safety standards.
Yep, the chase being added in 1987 because the FIA wouldn't sanction the World Touring Car Championship race there unless they broke up the straight a little bit. But I think the chase is one of the better additions to a racetrack in recent memory. Definitely provides a big challenge for the drivers and a heavy braking zone which should see some good passes. But this circuit is notorious for being difficult, Dan. When you're going up the mountain, there's concrete walls on all sides, barely barely any margin for error, and you are cascading your way down the mountain. It's so easy to make a mistake here, so easy to have your race ended.
Indeed, yeah. Of course, the straights, Mountain and Conrod, are pretty popular given that it's about the speed there. But of course, from Griffin's Bend all the way back down to Forest Elbow, as you say, it is about making sure that you're on the limit and you're up against the walls, but you do not want to be in said walls.
Yeah, and the drivers will definitely be going very close to those walls, as they had in all the pre-qualifying that we had in July. Over 1,500 laps of pre-qualifying competed just for the right to get into this event, and we are down to 12. We're going to be competing in the quarterfinals first off, a 10-minute qualifying session, 4 drivers each. We have 4 next level racing rigs here at room 360, and the top 8 drivers from those sessions will go through to the semi-finals. Basically just 2 3-lap races of 4 drivers each. That brings us down to the final 2. And they're going to be competing in a 7-lap final for this event. And we've got a really good roster of drivers for this one. We've got Kenny Conamos and Zach Christie joining us from Next Level Racing. We've got Tom Bidgood and Jacques Goodman. But we also have Cody Deeth, Dylan Burse, Andrew Gilliam, and Steen Ledger on screen here. Driver 1, of course, being Deeth. Driver 2 is Burse in the top right. Bottom left is Gilliam. Bottom right is Steen Ledger. They are already out there getting their laps done.
Yeah, currently it's a bit of practice before we'll get qualifying underway. I'm just giving the drivers, I guess, one chance to get familiar with the conditions that have been set up for this particular session, and then they'll get into the laps that count for the opening stage, which will be the quarterfinals here today. 10 minutes of qualifying will be what they have for that opening stage. So looking at 4, maybe 5 laps, depending on how they run things here, because they will have a little bit of freedom as to how they choose to do it. It's just that time will be the ultimate arbiter of things here for the opening stage.
Yeah, that it will. And we get live pictures from in the sim here, going up across McPhillamy Park and down through the S's. Steen Ledger in car 1. Goodness me, that goes to show exactly how dangerous this circuit is. Just getting the rear end loose, going across the top of the hill. Cody Deeth down at the chase. Meanwhile, this is pretty much the easiest part of the track. You've got a lot more space to deal with if you make an error.
Yeah, I mean, at the same time, it's also pretty easy to make a mistake. It says here in Murray's corner, as Deeth a little loose on the way through the corner itself, and that gets him all kinds of out of shape onto the front straight there. But these guys here, especially our first 4, I might add, are probably some of the faster guys, I would have said, based on results and experience. So we've seen these guys push the limits really hard, and that'll mean even at things like Murray's, they'll be up against the grass, and they could be easily millimetres away from losing control if they put a wheel over into the grass.
Yeah, and it looks like the fixed setup that these drivers are competing on is looking a little twitchy. Of course, we should talk about the car, the Ferrari 488 GT3 Evo. This car is Ferrari's addition to GT3 competition that started racing in 2020. So it's a car that's a few years old, but it's still very much a modern racing machine. It has traction control and anti-lock brakes, and it is mid-engine, so it is very agile, but apparently drivers have to deal with a little bit of understeer in this thing, which can certainly make things difficult when you're going through Reed and Sulman over the metal grate.
Yeah, and the fact that we don't have much time in qualifying, and we'll also see it in the races a little bit too later on for semi-finals and the main final, the drivers will be pushing to try and warm the tyres up, but at the same time, they'll have to make sure that they're not overdriving the car as a result, because if they burn the front tyres up too quickly, that'll hurt any chance at putting in a fast lap, say lap 3 or maybe lap 4.
Well, coming out of Hell Corner, the first turn here at Mount Panorama, Dylan Burse trying to get a representative time on the board in practice before they flick on through to that 10-minute qualifying session. Going through Griffin's Bend, he's looking nice and smooth. Of course, the drivers would have been doing all of their pre-qualifying at home on their own rigs. And that's something that we don't often take into account when we do these live on-location sim racing events. The drivers are competing in rigs that have been provided for them by Next Level Racing, and they might be different to what the drivers are used to at home. They will have to get used to everything being in potentially a slightly different position, and screens being in slightly different positions as well. That can affect your pace. They'll have to get used to that quickly.
Yeah, 100%. That will be one of the things to worry about here as we see Andrew Gilliam, our fourth and final driver, to join us here in the first of the the quarterfinal sessions here. So that means is we'll actually get to those qualifying laps in just a moment's time. But yeah, different hardware for most of these guys. I would presume the odds of them having the exact setup that we have here today at Queensland University of Technology is pretty low. So, and yeah, who can adapt to being on a slightly different setup than they're used to will be another important factor to these sessions today.
Of course, Andrew Gilliam just making it into the session in time before we flick over to the qualifying session. Remember, it goes for 10 minutes, and a lap around Mount Panorama in these cars takes a bit over 2 minutes. So the drivers will get 5 laps in this session to get things done, and they have to get out on track as soon as they can. They need as many opportunities as possible to get a representative time on the board. Remember, there's 12 drivers competing in these quarterfinals, and only 8 will make it through to the next stage.
Yeah, that will be important indeed. So we will have to say goodbye to 4 of the drivers who are at QUT today. Question is, we don't know just who it's going to be as our driver's heading out. It looks like it's going to be Steen Ledger who's the furthest up the road as we get this out lap underway. Now, the thing is, you said they might get 5 laps in here, Reece. To me, I'm thinking 4 laps because these drivers won't be going completely flat out on this out lap. They're certainly not going slow per se, but they're not anywhere near 100% as they ease the car through the bends here and make sure they don't overwork the front tyres in particular.
Yeah, as we mentioned, this car does have a tendency to understeer, so you want to keep as much grip in the fronts as possible, not overwork them, make sure that you don't plow off the circuit, particularly in these locations. Steen Ledger coming down towards the dipper, and looks like he's just getting used to the handling of the car at the moment. We also got to remember that this outlap is not timed, so again, that's one less opportunity they're going to have to set the best time possible. This is a hot lap competition, pretty much, these first stages of the Motorsport Australia Queensland Esports State Championships. Well, coming down Conrod Straight now, seems that Ledger's just gearing up.
Yeah, he is. As you see, a little bit of movement as he tries to get a bit of that side-to-side load through the car to heat up, and I can see at his speed coming down into the chase is about 100 k's an hour down on what it would be if he was going full tilt. So I believe, and by the looks of things, he's actually not going to be the first car across the start-finish line. That's actually now Dylan Burst who's gone on a push lap, but we'll stay here with Steen, I think, to pick up this first attempt of a lap here as he comes down into Murray's corner. Going to get our first timed laps underway. Nice and tidy there. Critical to make sure that the run here to Hell Corner for the first time is as fast as it can be. Just after the 100-metre break mark there for Ledger Reece, and rounds Hell Corner nicely, using plenty of the exit curb and pushing the limits there as he just tickles the grass on exit of turn 1.
Yep, only just, but I think it might be still within the bounds. So across the top of the rise, coming up towards Griffin's Bend. Let's see how aggressive he is here on entry. Actually looked like some very nice turn in there, but he's struggling for grip there on the exit, almost gets into the wall.
Well, as I said, his driver's certainly not afraid to push the limits as he brings it up into the cutting, and then a little wiggle there on the entry to the cutting as well. That's going to hurt this lap here, but so long as he keeps it going, this will be all okay, and he'll be able to get laps on the board as he climbs up over the hill there at Reed Park for the first time and coming back on down to the grate. So far looks all right, but having to use a lot of the track, using the curb there just after the grate as well, Reece, trying to get this car to turn in and be compliant the way he would like it. So far, doing a little better now in this second half of the lap, it seems.
Yeah. What we got to remember, of course, is that damage is on. So if you have a crash, then you're going to have to teleport back to the pits and do an entire outlap before you can set a time again. So what the drivers will be doing here is setting banker laps to start off with. They want to make sure that they get around cleanly, make sure that they get the time on the board, don't hit any of the walls, because if you're unfamiliar with the iRacing simulation, hello, by the way, to everyone watching on the Motorsport Australia socials, as well as Next Level Racing, the incident points system in iRacing, if you tap a wall, you will get a 0x, and that doesn't give you any incident points against you, but it does invalidate your lap. You also got to make sure not to go onto the grass. That will give you an off-track incident point. That will also invalidate your time. But it looks like Steen Ledger has managed to get his time on the board, 2:04.685. Andrew Gilliam, though, the quickest so far, 2:04.2.
Yep, these guys starting to wind up now, and critically for me, it means that Dylan Burst's first lap, who he's currently all the way up towards turn 2 of Griffin's Bend, is invalidated. Cody Death gets a lap on the board, but has already stopped up at turn 1.
He's out of the rig.
In fact, actually getting out already. Yeah, momentary hop out of the rig indeed. But jumping straight back in by the looks of things. We will turn our attention, though, to Dylan Burst here in the second of the rigs here. So he comes up through the cutting. They looked a little loose still, so looking like he's going to take his time here. Also seeing that he's actually apparently on his first lap, so must have reset somewhere along the way, because, the other drivers behind are on their second laps, and we'll see how things go from there. But already over halfway into this qualifying session, the first of our quarterfinal sessions here today as well, Reese, so not a lot of time left for Dylan Burst to be able to work his stuff, which I know he can put on the board when he gets things right.
Yeah, Burst is an incredibly quick driver, active in karting in the real world. And so definitely one of the best steerers on the sim. From what I've seen, we've had plenty of opportunities to see his driving on SimSpeed TV's broadcasts over the last couple of years. It looked like an all right exit from Forest Elbow. And it's all going to be about the chase now. It seems like he's not taking too much out of the entry to the chase. He's probably just getting a banker down at the moment. So we'll see what time this turns out to be. He will still have one more opportunity to go.
Yeah, he actually, on a good point, he will only get one more chance here, because
it's a hard cut to the end of the session. If you cross the line, usually if you cross the line, as that's a 2:03.8 from Andrew Gilliam. Burst getting onto his lap here. That's a really good time from Gilliam. That's fantastic stuff. In normal sessions, if you start your lap before the clock hits 0, you will be able to complete it. But this session's been set up so that when the clock hits 0, the session's over. If you're on a lap, you won't be able to complete it. So pressure's on for Burst.
Yeah, it was actually one of the trade-offs that had to be made in terms of if we did it the way where you're allowed to complete the lap you're on once time hits 0, he would have, one, there would actually have to be other cars on track, and 2, we've been limited to a maximum of 4 laps regardless of how the session was configured. So this way, it's been configured so that you get 10 minutes, but it's 10 minutes, as you said, exactly. So no room for error here for Burst, because he's on his second and what will be his final opportunity to put a lap on the board. And this would be a shock departure. The question, we'll see if that was enough to flag a 0x. No sign of it on his face just yet here as he works his way down towards the dipper.
Yeah, my apologies on my end here in Perth. I was looking at Steen Ledger's car. He tapped the wall, so I don't think he'll be able to vault over Andrew Gilliam for the top spot in this session, but we'll keep an eye here on Dylan Burst as he makes his way out onto Conrod Straight. Let's see what kind of max speed they can get out of these cars. 1 minute 30 mark is done, and looks like this lap is going to be competitive. He's going to have to beat at least a 2:05.4. That's what Cody Death managed to do. Can he break into the low 2:04s, maybe a high 2:03, and get up there with Andrew Gilliam and Steen Ledger? Just kisses the curb through the chase and then down to Murray's Corner, the last braking zone of the lap. This corner is deceptively difficult. From the air, it looks like a right angle corner. Easy, not so. Got to keep it off the grass here, and across the start finish line he comes. It's going to be a 2:04.8 for Dylan Burst, and that will be P3 in the session.
And that will have to be it for now. It's just a question of whether that will be enough to be in the top 8 overall? Those are the question marks there. Cody Deeth looks like he'll be our final driver to possibly be on a lap here as he comes out of Forest Elbow. Looking at things, I'm seeing personal best sectors on this run, and given he's minute 30 as he comes down Conrod, pushing along nicely here is Deeth, so needs to go better than his time of 2:05.4. That will certainly, well, I would expect, Reese, that won't be enough to make it through into the top 8 here. So this one is the lap that counts for him right in the dying seconds of the session. Looks all right there through the chase. One corner left to go here for the number 3 machine.
All right, onto the brakes he goes. Use the anti-lock brakes just to slow the cars down. Gets a bit too much curb there at Murray's. Is this going to be enough? 2:04.23. That is 0.6 faster than Dylan Burse. Deeth right at the end, pulling it out.
Yep, that should do him nicely there as he'll power on up the straight at the very least. But time will reach 0 here in about 15 seconds time. And that will do it for the first of our quarterfinal sessions here with the opening 4 drivers. So results now up on screen. 2:03.826. That should be comfortable there for Andrew Gilliam. Steen Ledger and Cody Deeth in behind him. Should be comfortable as well. Maybe a question mark over Dylan Burse's time, given the way things work. But as always, still 8 drivers to come to see if that changes for him there.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's going to be the end of the first of our quarter final sessions. Tell you what a fantastic session that was. We're going to throw to David Haynes now, who's live there at room 360 at the University of Queensland, and I think he's going to be having a chat to Andrew Gilliam.
Of 12 qualifying drivers, Andrew Gilliam went to the top in the first session. Yeah, there we go. He's pretty happy. He's going to come over and chat with me in a second, but as we saw, a very, very high level of talent on display here. These are the top qualified drivers from around Queensland, and 12 of them have come here. Only 1 second around the 6.2 kilometres that is Mount Panorama to separate our first 4 qualifying drivers. Those are some competitive times. We'll see if they hold up in the next round of drivers, which is Hayden Sell, Dennis Gaderick, Caleb Hydes, and Luke Turner. Those guys are going to be setting themselves up on the next Level Racing rigs. Right now, while I chat with the current top seed, Andrew Gilliam. Well, it's the same iRacing, it's the same scan of Mount Panorama that you're used to at home, but here in front of a crowd at QUT on some wheels, pedals, a location you're not quite as familiar with. How pleased are you with a result like that in just 10 quick minutes of session?
Yeah, absolutely. It was really stressful not knowing what gear we're going to get, the amount of time we're going to get to practice and adapt. So, you try your best at home to kind of get the settings you expect, but yeah, it was just basically getting up to speed as quickly as possible. My goal was to basically just build up lap on lap until I was used to the gear. I just knew with such limited time and how long it takes the tires to warm up, I had to just get a banker lap in and not hit those walls.
4 more drivers coming up now. How confident are you that that time you've just set in this first bank of drivers is going to stay within that top 8 and maybe within the top 4?
I'm fairly confident it'll stay well in the top 4. We got some really good steerers coming up though, so you never know. There was definitely a bit more on that lap, but I think you were just watching everyone trying their best to just get used to the different load cell pedal, different force feedback settings without shunting the car. So I reckon we'll get faster and faster as the day progresses too.
Right, there you go. At the moment, the fastest qualifier, Andrew Gilliam, alongside me. And again, the 4 drivers on the rigs right now that have come from our group that have qualified online. Hayden Sell, Dennis Gaderick, Caleb Hydes, and Luke Turner.
Well then, this is certainly turning out to be quite the interesting event. And we have 4 more drivers on their way to us now, Dan, for the second of our quarter final sessions, waiting to see exactly who will be taking part in this. But, wow, I think that time set by Andrew Gilliam, definitely the benchmark.
Yeah, it is a good benchmark indeed. What I have been told is it will be the next 4 drivers who made it through the pre-qualifying stages held earlier this week. So those drivers in question being Hayden Sell, Dennis Gadderick, Caleb Hydes, and Luke Turner. We'll hopefully have confirmation of who's who when we get things on the Zoom wall in due course. But they're just getting into the rigs now, so they'll log in a moment's time. As big thanks to Jay Kenny. Their time's now in the bottom left of your screen as we go back to some of the in-game footage here whilst we're waiting to get things underway. I am going to be curious to see someone like Dylan Burst second off Andrew Gilliam here in the opening stage of qualifying. In some respects, you don't need to show your hand here. It's just a matter of getting through is what counts. But depending on how competitive things are here, that might be a time that comes under pressure there, that 204.8.
Yeah, I think that, this is going to be the session that where we really set the stage for the last quarter-final session. Remember, there's 3 of them. We're gearing up for the second. 12 drivers competing, top 8 go through. So we will have 8 times to deal with here at the end of this session. And it'll be down to those final 4 drivers in the next one to go faster than whatever the bottom time is coming out of this session. But I find that really it's a matter of managing the pressure in a session like this, because you've obviously got Mount Panorama. It's one of the most difficult racetracks on the entire planet, and one mistake can cost you your entire run. So I get the feeling that aside from maybe Andrew Gilliam, who we know has done so many laps here we can't even count, I think a lot of the drivers here might not be pushing as hard as they otherwise would. They want to try and focus on self-preservation and make sure that they actually get a time on the board in the first place.
Yeah, 10 minutes, not a lot of time to get things sorted. So could easily be a case of if you overdrive things, will end up in a spot of bother. So, yeah, play it safe, get the time on the board, and then see what comes of it, because you do have then racing part of today to come after that with the semi-finals, and then after that, if you can make it, the final.
Yeah, it's going to be a long, arduous road to whoever wins the top prize from this event. The winner is going to get an X-Level Racing GT Elite Light Wheel Plate Edition rig and an ES1 Elite seat. That is going to certainly be a fantastic prize to come away with. Second and third will come away with an X-Level Racing GT Light Pro rig and an HF8 haptic feedback gaming pad too. So really awesome to see the support that Next Level Racing has jumped in for this event. As the drivers are loading into the session now, we've got Sell and Gattarick in there at the moment, just waiting on Hydes and Turner, and it looks like one of them has decided to jump in there.
Yeah, so I can tell you that we've got, so I have been able to identify who Caleb Hydes is on which one is Caleb Hydes, and also been told about Hayden Sell, where he is, and I can actually see he's actually wearing his 9.5 SimSport shirt, so that definitely identifies Hayden amongst the drivers on the Zoom wall.
Bottom left.
There, Reese. Well, for me, it's not bottom. Oh, actually, there it is on the production feed. It's definitely bottom left. Caleb Hydes is in the top left of your screen. Then, unfortunately for Dennis Gadderick and Luke Turner, I don't know which of those two they... Unfortunately, we might need confirmation from someone on site to maybe give us a bit of a message in our ears, Reese, to be able to confirm that for us there.
Yeah, well, we will get that confirmed very soon. Of course, Jay will bring up the drivers' Zoom feeds when they're out on their laps, so that should make things a little bit easier for us. Anyway, reminder of the times that these guys have to beat as the practice session comes to an end, then 10 minutes of qualifying. We are about to roll here in the second of our quarter finals. There's the session transition there. That's everyone disappearing off the circuit as it ticks over into qualifying. And it looks like we are already going. The drivers have to get out there. They are preparing. They are almost about to roll. And we'll see who gets the best time out of these 4.
Yeah, it looks like it's going to be Caleb Hydes away first from the pit lane So he'll get a couple of seconds advantage here relative to the others at least. But everyone else
looks like
out.
Yeah, Turner, Sell, and Gatterick in order behind.
Indeed, yes, that is the order of our four. And actually, Luke Turner's actually come out right behind Caleb Hydes' position. So depending on how the warm-up goes, we'll see if it stays with Caleb as the first one across the line or whether Luke Turner might sneak ahead here, as you can see. Down into first gear for the cutting race, and then a little bit of a wiggle as he tries to put the power on exit. His cold tyres in these cars around this place in particular is a tricky combo. So far, no one in the wall yet in the qualifying phase. Yet to see someone push limits. That's actually a brush of the wall, I think, there on exit of the grade.
Just about. So Hyde's definitely pushing the limit here on his outlap. I think he's just trying to get a little bit of heat into those tyres. We haven't talked much about the conditions in this session at the moment, as that was some big understeer coming into the dipper. It's actually overcast conditions in the server at the moment. 26-degree air temperature, 27-degree track temperature. And it's 3:30 in the afternoon in sim time. So the drivers are not going to be dealing with a particularly hot track out there. The sun is not going to be hitting the track. UV rays are not going to be interacting with the tarmac, because iRacing does model that. Something that the drivers do have to take into account is the way the sun interacts with the track surface. But they're going to have to work their tyres as Hydes continues gearing up here. Time for the run to the line, Dan. Let's see what he can do.
Really having to back it off here for Murray's Corner. You very rarely go to first gear on a proper flying run. We'll see now as he works his way up towards Held Corner, right up against the white line there, and hits a pretty aggressive brake marker. A little wide of the ideal apex and a little wiggle there on corner exit car. Still not fully compliant, but at least pointing in the right way and won't have lost too much time to start this lap off.
All right, like an all right exit. Top speed on the run down to Griffin's Bend. He just hits 240 k's an hour on the way into the turn, and you have to stick to the inside. There's a big crown in the road through that corner, and when they actually start racing against each other, you do not want to be on the outside through there. You'll just understeer into the wall. The cutting, meanwhile, looks like a clean line through there. Probably could have been maybe a quarter of a car length more to the car width, more to the inside, but it's all about just getting to the end of the lap here on the first lap of the run.
Yep. Get this lap being clean. Hopefully have it as your banker, because at most you're probably going to get 3 laps, and you're still going to be building tyre temp as you go. Looks all right there through McPhillamy, and already now down to the S's. And just making sure you don't run one. We saw Caleb run very wide on his outlap. That looked a lot neater down through to the dipper on that occasion, Reese, as he sets up now for Forest Elbow and this run back down the hill on Conrod Straight.
Oh, he was working the wheel hard there on the exit of the elbow. Probably dealt with a tiny bit of understeer that then turned into oversteer as he got onto the power. But he has a moment to rest here down Conrod Straight. Hype himself up for the brake application into the chase. How much of the apron does he take on entry here? He puts almost the whole car onto that apron of tarmac, and very late on the brakes, as you would be in a GT3 car. And that looks like a nice clean exit. Didn't look like much of a complaint from the car there. So, one more corner to go. Remember, Andrew Gilliam with the fastest time right now, 2:03.8. How close are these drivers going to get? Hydes is a quick one, but it's going to be a 2:05.5 to start things off here. And looks like Dennis Gatterick has already gone faster than that, as has Hayden Sell. 2:04.39 for Gatterick. Hayden Sell, 2:04.9. So, they haven't quite been able to get close to Gilliam's time yet, but we'll see what happens on this next lap.
Yeah, first lap is at least something. It does mean that it does show that, only one driver from this group actually getting ahead of Dylan Burse for now, mind you. Burse obviously did put his time in late in the session, as there'll be plenty of time for that to come as we check in here with Luke Turner, who's currently last of everyone in the session so far. But, despite the fact that we're already halfway into this second of our quarterfinal qualifying sessions, it's technically early days, I guess you could say. It is kind of a hard way they think early days, yeah, but also no, not really. You've only got one more lap after this. So whether Luke here pushes on all the way on this lap to make this a second flying lap in a row, if maybe he just takes a little bit off this lap to make sure the tyres are still in good shape for lap 3.
It was very aggressive down the hill, wasn't it? And you can see the concentration on Luke Turner's face here as he tries to straight line these S-bends as much as possible across the cliff down to Forest Elbow. I've been to this circuit in real life, and let me tell you, there's a lot of cliches said about Mount Panorama that TV pictures don't do it justice. Well, I can tell you, it's true. The run into Forest Elbow is so steep, it looks like a mountain of tarmac rising up in front of you. But that's far behind for Luke Turner. Coming down into the chase, what kind of speed is he going to reach here? Looks like he just touched 274 kilometers per hour on the way down to the braking zone. These cars carrying a lot of pace down these straights. Remember, they are all running the same setup as well, just for competition's sake. So they're all dealing with the same thing. He went a bit wide in Murray's corner, though. He might be a little frustrated with that. 205.4 is going to be the run there for Luke Turner. He does improve, but he remains last of the drivers so far.
Yeah, that's also critically hurts his lap here as well, which will mean that this third and final chance he's got to improve will be a bit of a struggle. Gaderick has dropped back on that lap there, so he's decided to commit to a lap at speed there to get a time on the board. A lap that was quite conservative to look after the tyres, and this now his final chance to improve on his 204.396. Maybe get himself up into provisional second if he can eclipse Steen Ledger, or maybe just knock Cody Death down a spot at the very least here. As it's actually going to be a fairly tight little wiggle there on the exit of turn 2, though. Certainly trying to hustle here on this final chance for himself.
Yep, smooth turn in there for the cutting. Gaderick trying to hold himself true. He's still not able to surpass Cody Death's time from the earlier session, but all he needs is 0.2 of a second, and he'll be able to beat that. And that might just make the difference for him. Across the top of the hill now. How does he go through the S's? Looks pretty much mistake-free in the first stage of it, Dan, but now he has to focus on the exit of the elbow.
Yep, that will be critical. Don't want to go in too quick here, because if you fire it in too fast and have the car understeer, it's a little wide from the angle I was watching him at least, but puts his foot down and pressing on here this final lap. About a minute 30. I think he might be a little bit off there.
You can see it in his face.
Yeah, he doesn't quite have, it's not a very satisfied expression indeed, Reese. Coming up to the chase for the final time here in this session for Dennis. Doesn't use the extra bit of time there. Then again, it is a GT3 car. It doesn't really need it per se. Does hit the apex nicely there of the chase and using the exit curbs to good effect as well.
Hayden Sell improves, meanwhile. He's up to a 204.6. Gaderick, meanwhile, can he improve here on his top time? 2 minute 3.89. That is pretty good time there. That will put him overall second, just behind Andrew Gilliam.
Yep, so that is a nice improvement there. Leapfrogging Steen Ledger and Cody Death at this stage. Yeah. Dylan Burse is safe. Will be P7 at this stage. Has been beaten by Caleb Hydes, only just, though, by a matter of about 0.02 of a second. Based on the times as we are indeed inside the final minute. No one is going to be able to make it round, so that is their times done. And now Luke Turner on the bubble with his time of a 205.20. Unfortunately, little mistake really hurt him in his attempts to set a fast time here in the quarterfinals.
Yeah, will that make the difference for him? We still have 4 drivers left to compete as the session ticks down here. Thanks to the hard cut, these drivers won't be able to finish their lap, but they are getting a little bit of extra track time in just in case. They've got to remember that they still have a few races to go as Hydes decides to do a little bit of a slalom session in the last few seconds. So, Those are your Group 2 results there. Gatterick on top, Sell 7/10 off Gatterick, with Hides and Turner bringing up the last 2 spots here. Well, I got to say, I'm happy with how these sessions have gone so far. We've seen some excellent displays of driving, Dan, and I think this last session is certainly going to be the one to watch.
Yeah, it is our drivers who have been invited to represent Next Level Racing and the Queensland University of Technology. And whilst that means we don't really have an exact form guide for those 4 drivers, it certainly means that we might see some surprises in terms of drivers here, like Luke Turner, maybe Dylan Burse and Caleb Hides, potentially being under threat here in this session. But it's all up for grabs here as Group 2 comes to a close, and the time's on screen for you there.
Yeah, indeed. Well, they basically got to beat a 2:05.5, these last 4 drivers that will be competing. And it looks like they're already looking to jump on in to the rigs now. This is going to be, I think, a pretty quick turnaround before we get things going for the final of our quarterfinal sessions. Reminder, the top 8 will go through to the semi-finals where they actually race together. All right, let's go to David Haynes live from room 360.
David Haynes back here on location at QUT. We've just had 4 more drivers set up their qualifying times. And remember, from these qualifying sessions, it's the top 8 that go through into our semi-finals and then to our final 4 in the grand final. The drivers that are about to get on the rigs are Kenny Economos, Zach Christie, Tom Bidgood and Jacques Goodman. But I'm here with Dennis Gatterick, who was the fastest of the 4 drivers just on the rigs then. Again, a short, sharp 10-minute session to try to get it done. How are the nerves and how do you feel?
Mate, very, very nervous, but also very excited. Obviously, this is very, very big in the esports community, and it's good that it's getting some kind of recognition and events. So, no, very, very happy to be here.
And as far as yourself, where are you from in Queensland? Any family supporters here with you?
No, they're actually all in Europe at the moment. So, just me, myself. I'm going down a little bit later, but no, just me, myself. It's good for the nerves. I don't have to look at anybody else. Fine.
So there we go. Dennis Gatterick, now the second fastest of the 8 drivers we've had, the fastest in that bracket. Got 4 more drivers coming up on the rigs right now. And from Next Level Racing, our rig sponsors and supporters, Kenny Economos and Zach Christie, and the QUT Esports drivers who qualified here on location at QUT Gardens Point, Tom Bidgood and Jacques Goodman. They're getting ready to go. We're getting ready, and soon we'll know the 8 drivers going through into our semi-finals to get one step closer to the Motorsport Australia Queensland Esports State Championship.
Dennis Gatterick, their top driver from quarterfinal number 2. We're getting ready for quarterfinal number 3 here, Dan, and this is going to be the big decider. Once again, if you just joined us, I'm Reese Gardner, Dan Yeaman with me in the comms box, and Jay Kennedy handling production live from QUT's Room 360. This has been an awesome event so far. We've got to see some excellent displays of driving around the Mount Panorama Circuit, but now we have the wild cards, Dan. We got 2 drivers from Next Level Racing and 2 drivers representing Queensland University of Technology. We'll see how fast they can go and whether or not they can get amongst the top 8.
Yeah, indeed. This is going to be an interesting one, that's for sure. Kenny Economos and Zach Christie representing NLR, and those names I've heard before. Kenny's a little bit more so, Reese. But yeah, Tom Bidgood and Jacques Goodman for QUT Sport. Yeah, complete wildcards for this one here. So this is going to be a fascinating look to see how things go in this session. If they can, will there be any of our drivers who went through the pre-qualifying stage knocked out here at the quarterfinals?
Yeah, well, the time that we have to keep in mind is 2:05.5. If any of these drivers run faster than that, then they have a chance. But they got to make sure that they are not in the bottom 4 overall. Remember, it is the top 8 who go through to the semi-final. 2 3-lap races of 4 drivers each, and then the top 2, that is to say the winners of both of those races, will go through to the 7-lap final here at the Mount Panorama Circuit. Big thanks once again to Next Level Racing and to Thrustmaster for their support of this event. The drivers are running on Next Level Racing rigs and running Thrustmaster wheelbases in the setup at Room 360 at QUT. Well, drivers are loading into the server now, and we shall see whether or not these guys can break into those top 8 times, and we see if our wildcards can make their way through against some of Australia's best sim racers.
Yeah, that is going to be the big question for us here today. I think, particularly for me, the big takeaway from those 2 qualifying sessions here today as part of this quarterfinal format, despite the fact that it's not very hot on track, it is definitely a tricky car still to handle for our drivers here today. As we've got the drivers on screen, but unfortunately I don't know who's who apart from the obvious identification of who they're representing here today. Hopefully we'll get confirmation of that in a moment as well. Yeah, Kenny and Zach for NLR, Tom and Jacques for QUT. We'll hopefully have all of them in the session in a moment. Just waiting on, I believe it would be Tom, and then we'll be able to get into qualifying session here. In fact, just a moment, because it looks like he'll be coming into the session any second now.
Yeah, looks like he's showed up now on the in-server driver list. And so number 1 is Jacques Goodman. That is the top left there. We've also got Tom Bidgood in the top right. Bottom left is, of course, Zach Christie and Kenny Konomos down on the bottom right there. So we'll check in with these guys when they're on their laps, and this is one of the things that I like the most about this event. I get to see drivers that I have never seen sim racing before, and we can see how well they stack up against the excellent times set by the likes of Dennis Gaderick and Andrew Gilliam earlier.
Yeah, that will be critical indeed. Well, with everyone in the session, I believe it is just any moment now we'll get things underway here. And yeah, this will be curious to see, because we're just 10 minutes in any of these drivers not. I think, to be honest, I would say Kenny Konomos, solid chance for him to be able to get into the top 8 here, Reese. I know that he's not too bad of a steerer in GT3 cars. Not so certain on Zach Christie's performance. But I mean, yeah, look, I would, for the sake of for the event, I would love to see a surprise in either Tom or Jacques making a surprise run to the semi-finals. I guess part of me was like, oh, we've got 8 sim racers who went through a qualifying gauntlet and 4 invited drivers. It might seem clear cut when 8 go through to the semis, but I'm certainly here and would definitely be interested to see things be shaken up, as we are indeed about to begin the 10-minute qualifying for these drivers. So time for them to head out on track.
Who will cause an upset here out of these 4 on screen at the moment? QUT versus Next Level Racing. Jacques Goodman is the first driver to emerge onto the circuit in the QUT Sport Ferrari 488. And it looks like following him out a long way behind is Kenny Konomos. Tom Bidgood in between the two of them, and then Zach Christie bringing up the rear of the train. Of course, this is a solo qualifying session, so all drivers are out on track on their own at the moment. They are completing laps at the same time in the same server, but they cannot see each other. They cannot collide with each other. It is just them and the track.
And I think, it is the way to make sure that they don't have to worry about anyone else. As you said, it is just them in the circuit, and with a place like Mount Panorama, that's crucial. As we see here, Jacques building up speed on the outlap, looking solid there to get things over the top of McPhilly Park. Maybe, he's even there still, though, a little wiggle on the exit of the corner into McPhillamy. then easing it down the S's. But all in all, pretty solid there. Maybe a little slow here at the bottom of the S's as the front tyres. They'll be where they're complaining the most right this second. This car is an interesting car, being mid-engine, but it still really does struggle with understeer, depending on when you've got the car set up, and generally how I find it by default, Reese. It likes to understeer a little bit on cold tyres in particular. So we'll see here if these drivers can adapt as we get ready to go to our first flying laps.
So Jacques on the way down to the chase then, just gearing up now for his official first banker lap. They would have been observing what the other drivers were doing here, and they'll have gotten an idea of how to approach this session, as well as doing their own preparations in the meantime. Seems to be you've just got to get the banker on the board and then try to go fast. So Goodman across the line now, and down to Hell Corner he comes. A very difficult corner this. The first and last corners on this track, Dan, I think are the most deceptively difficult of any track in the world. They look super simple from the air, but they're really not.
Yep, 90-degree left-hand turns, but they can make and break your lap just as easily as any other corner on this circuit. Of course, even though it's a short run to the start-finish line, that can make a lot of difference. And Hell Corner, critically, of course, the run there up Mountain Straight as Jacques already up into the cutting for his first time at speed. A little wide of the apex initially, but gets a good late apex, I have to say, there as he climbs on up out of there. So this should be a solid banker if he keeps things up at this rate, as he's already up past Reed Park and down towards Sulman.
Yeah, looking nice and smooth on the wheel as well. He's got the focus on through McPhillamy. Just kisses the curb, doesn't take as much of it as we've seen other drivers take, but stability is key on the banker lap. We'll see how much more he takes out of it next time around. Through the dipper, tiny bit wide. That's okay, as long as he keeps it out of the wall. That is the main goal here on this first lap. And a bit of a wider entry into Forest Elbow than we've seen in the past. Most drivers take a direct line to the inside there, but it seems he's gearing up for that exit onto Conrod Straight. Yeah, this is looking like a pretty good lap so far, and remember, top speed about 274 k's an hour on the run down to the chase. We'll see how close Jacques Goodman gets to that.
Just brushing past 273 as he hits the anchors in the chase itself there, and this is all looking pretty composed and under control. Waiting to see what the time will be when he gets to the start-finish line as Murray's corner left to negotiate in the right places up against the white line, gets it pulled up. Definitely has to be a little conservative here on the opening up, but he got a clean run through Murray's there recent to 206.0, which is unfortunately not going to be enough to make it through right now, but it's at least a starting point here for Jacques as he works his way onto his second flying lap.
Indeed. Tom Bidgood, meanwhile, he unfortunately seemed to have an issue on his first lap. He has gone back out and is going to try and get a lap in here, but he will have less opportunities to set a good time. Kenny Konomos setting the second time on the board. He's only half a tenth behind Jacques Goodman, so this will certainly be a close one, if nothing else. Zach Christie has not been able to set a time yet. He did complete the lap in the next level racing car, but I think he brushed the wall and got a 0x, which invalidated the lap. So Zach Christie already on the back foot there, but we'll see what Tom Bidgood is able to do here as he makes his way down.
I'm just thinking he might still be on the outlap here, so we'll have to see if this one counts. Which means he might only have, and critically here, he's going to be pretty close to time. So this is going to be crucial to see exactly where he is, whether he gets one lap here or two laps. Is really fighting the car there on the exit of the chase. This is going to be close, Reese, as to whether he can make it. Because at the times in the 203, 204 range, he's got to be across the line in no more than about 5 seconds from now. 7, 6. If he can do 203s. He's got 2 laps. Otherwise, he will fall just short and only get one flying lap here by the looks of things.
Yeah, looks like it. Well, Bidgood, that lap didn't count. He actually came into the pit lane and took a stop. So he is This looks like probably going to be his one and only chance to set a time. Coming towards the end of the lap, though, down to the chase, Zach Christie, one of two drivers, not with a time on the board at the moment, but he'll be coming to the end of it now, and I think he will be able to get one more lap on the board after this as Goodman goes faster, 2:05.1 now. That is into the top 8. And looks like Christie's lap didn't count again. Unfortunately, he's just getting a little bit too close to those walls as we get our first 2:04 now of the session. Konomos with a 2:04.7.
And with that, unfortunately, that will push Jacques back out of the top 8 as Konomos will go with a 2:04.69 in between Hayden Sell and Caleb Hides there. So provisional P6 for Kenny. Moves Dylan Burse's time of a 2:04.886 as the marker now for these drivers here in our third and final of our quarterfinal qualifying runs to beat, as Kenny pressing on for his final lap to see if maybe he can improve ever so slightly more. Either way, it shouldn't matter. He's got himself in a pretty happy spot here, but nevertheless on the attack as he climbs up out of the cutting for the final time.
So it looks like Kenny Konomos might be the one to upset the apple cart here. Luke Turner has been pushed out of the top 8 and thus will be out of the event, I think, with that time being set. Will he be pushed even further out? We'll have to wait and see, as that was very close to the wall on the inside on the run up to the dipper. Konomos is absolutely nailing these apexes right now.
Yep, can't quite see him behind the trees there, but you can see lots of attack into Forest Elbow there and a lot of steering angle to try and get the car pulled up as a result as he comes out of Forest Elbow. Looks like here this is not too bad of a time. 1:30 as he's coming there down to the bottom of the dip in on the Conrod straightaway. I'm also keeping an eye on Zach Christie, who's just technically the road a tiny bit from Kenny here, but we'll watch to see what the driver here with the number 1 on his red and black machine can do in this session. Brings it up out of the chase here, Reese. This is looking like it's all going to be close to improvement or thereabouts. 1 quarter left for him to go.
As Zach Christie finally gets a time on the board, it's a 2:05.9, 2:04.1 for Kenny Konomos. That is fantastic stuff. That puts him provisional P4, just behind Steen Ledger, ahead of Cody Deeth. Fantastic performance there from Kenny. Tom Bidgood, he has not much time here to get a time on the board. He's been struggling to do that throughout this session. He only has 45 seconds to get to the start-finish line. Remember, he was one of the drivers that we were looking at and thinking, will he be able to get that second lap in? I don't know if it's going to be the case here, Dan.
I think, unfortunately for Tom here, cruel as the margins, you watch this timer reach 0 and he'll be basically on the apex of Murray's corner and be all of 4 to 5 seconds away from the start-finish line to get a lap on the board here. But we'll ride with him to the end. He's the final driver on circuit, down through the chase as he hits the brakes here. Keeps committed here, which is good to see. As I just keep watching, 10 seconds ago as he exits the chase. And unfortunately, this should be it. He'll come to Murray's corner. And as I said, 3, 2, 1. He apexes at 0 seconds left in the session. And just like that, unfortunately, it will be session over before Tom can put a lap on the board. But that means we now know our top 8 drivers that we will be seeing through to the semi-final stage of the Motorsport Australia Queensland Esports Championship race.
Yeah, indeed we do. Well, it looks like Kenny Konomos and Jacques Goodman are going to just make it in to the top 8 there. Excellent performance from both of those drivers. It looks like we will have one Next Level Racing driver and one QUT Sport driver in these semi-finals coming up here. Unfortunate there for Zach Christie and Tom Bidgood, but they gave it a red-hot go. It's really nice to keep going there. My apologies, got the numbers slightly wrong. Jacques Goodman is P9, so he just missed out on getting into the top 8. So Kenny is in, Burse hanging on to 8th overall. All right, let's have a check-in with Kenny Konomos. He stood by with David Haynes.
It is, again, back here at QUT at Room 360 with a beautiful view of Brisbane City for Motorsport Australia. Queensland Esports State Championship. We've just seen the qualifying from our next level racing drivers and our QUT Sport athletes. And I'm here with the fastest driver from that bracket of qualifying. Kenny, how did you find it? You, of all people, should be relatively comfortable with the next level racing rigs.
Thanks, mate. Yeah, it's pretty tricky out there. It's just the environment, the setup. It's all new. It's all different equipment. You're not really used to it, so it's really about just adapting as quick as you can, and just at the same time trying to push as hard as you can, but not making mistakes. So I'm just happy to make it through qualifying and get into a race.
Yeah, super limited opportunity there with only a couple of laps to try to put your best forward, try to make it into the top 8 to continue on in this competition into the semi-finals. You scrape your way in. Does that settle the nerves, or do they keep building as we head towards the semi-final?
For me, it settles the nerves, but we'll see once we start racing. So.
Right, there we go. Great to now have what our 8 drivers will be as we head towards the semi-final. 2 semi-finals, of course, will then set our top 4 for the grand final. We're getting towards the serious end of the racing.
Fantastic job you're doing there on site. And now, Dan, I suppose it's time to gear up for those semi-finals that David managed to touch on there. We've got 2 3-lap races. That top 8 that we have from the quarterfinals will be seeded into 2 sessions, and we'll be able to see them all competing there. Remember, we've got to focus on who wins. The winner of each individual race will face off against each other in the final. So you got to be in P1
and P2, mind you. We do have 2 drivers from each semi-final who can make it through, but nevertheless, with 4 drivers per race, 2 make it through. Still saying goodbye to 2 drivers here in each of our semi-final races. So it's going to be interesting to see how things work out. Can confirm for you our first 4 drivers that we'll be seeing in the first of our semi-final races will be Andrew Gilliam, Dennis Gaderick, Caleb Hydes, and Dylan Burse. Will be our first 4 drivers to take to at the rigs once again, and in racing conditions this time. And we'd sort of, the only thing really is that it's a super short race, only 3 laps, as you said, Reese. So this will be interesting to see who can make sure they're on the ball when it comes to staying together and in a pack, and when drivers who maybe are sitting 3rd or 4th when this race gets underway attempt to make a move for 2nd, maybe 1st.
Yeah, we did discuss that a little bit before we went live, didn't we? Is the fact that you want to try and stay in the pack, you want to stay close to those top 2 places, and then on the final lap, that's when you try and make your moves. But Mount Panorama is a track that's notorious for being difficult to pass at. Really, the only guaranteed overtaking opportunities are into potentially turn 1, definitely turn 2, and then the run into the Chase and Murrays. Other than that, it's follow the leader across the top.
It is, yeah. Maybe add in the cutting, maybe you add in Forest Elbow as well as, but like I said, they're more of the maybe passing opportunities as you make your way up the mountain. But as you said, basically, and I would say from the cutting all the way to Forest Elbow, single file, you don't try and make moves there. Not unless you're, crazy might be putting it a bit strongly, or desperate, perhaps. So we'll have to wait and see, really. I would think, though, with 4 cars here on track, there aren't too many odds of cars getting away or getting out of control, as it were, per se. As see our drivers on screen, it'll be Dennis Gaderick, top left in the number 1 slot, Dylan Burse, top right in the number 2 slot, Andrew Gilliam, bottom left in the number 3 slot, and Caleb Hydes, number 4 in the bottom right of your screen to get this race underway. But we'll be getting underway soon. Yeah, I would expect from these guys here, we should presumably see them stick together and, yeah, wait to make their moves at the last possible opportunity so that they don't come under basically a counterattack.
Yeah, that's something that I've talked about so many times in my sim racing broadcasts over the years is the fact that if you're going to be making a move, especially at a track like this, you want to make it stick at the last available opportunity so that the drivers behind you don't have a chance to fight back. And keeping it consistent around this track is a major factor as well. You got to focus on your exits. There's long straights at this circuit. The exit of turn 1, you've got to nail it. The exit of Griffins, you've got to nail it so someone doesn't try and make it side by side into the cutting. And the exit of Forest Elbow, you've got the whole of Conrod Straight to deal with there. And if a driver is within a second of you coming out of that corner, they can very easily draft up to you and pass you on the way into the chase.
Yeah, we'll be curious to see how the draft plays here with these Ferrari GT3 cars and being on the same setup here today. I would say, yeah, maybe more like you have to be within half a second to guarantee a chance of a move at the chase if you're coming off a Forest Elbow. But these cars also, yes, they have traction control, but the traction control doesn't always intervene perfectly. There can still be a little bit of slip, but also when that TC intervenes, Reese, it'll kill your power and torque, and that'll kill your run off of a corner onto a very long straightaway where you do not want that to happen.
Yeah, indeed. The drivers who are active in these GT3 cars will definitely know that if you're already in a slide by the time you get onto the power, then the traction control will kick in and actually make the slide worse. That's something that the drivers will be trying to deal with. They'll try and lean on the traction control in places where they know they can, but for the most part, they're just going to be feathering the throttle out of these corners, trying to be as smooth as they possibly can.
Yeah, smooth is fast. It's basically a message that is a tale as old as time when it comes to motorsport across a variety of disciplines, and most certainly here at the mountain, that is can't be truer words. Across the top, more than most, but even down the bottom. Sure, it's two 90-degree corners, but yeah, Murray's and Hell Corner, you've got to be smooth and on your marks to make them work as well.
That you do. And all of these drivers on screen at the moment, they'll have plenty of experience at this track, running in various official iRacing events and sim racing leagues as well, independent leagues like V8 Scops, which Andrew Gilliam has competed in quite a bit as well. Logitech G Pro Invitational Series too, all driving in the Australian touring cars, and of course you'd race at Bathurst in championships like that. Gilliam has done some of the most spectacular laps of this circuit on a sim that I've ever seen in the last few years. So I'm looking for very big things from him here. Gatterick, meanwhile, in the top left, well, he was able to get very close to Gilliam's time. This is going to be incredibly interesting to see which of them comes away with the top spot and if they can keep Burse and Hides behind them, as it seems Gilliam just having a slight little chat there to Mr. Haynes, and the drivers are already starting to have a bit of fun out there. It seems that Dylan Burse and Caleb Hides losing nothing of their playful nature out there on the racetrack. Let's just hope that they don't do that in the race.
99 times out of 100, you can trust those guys to keep their heads screwed on straight during a race. And this certainly needs to be one of those occasions for both of them. So, going to be in their hands at that point as to whether they play it square or whether they choose to get a little bit trigger happy. As we're just waiting on Dennis Gatterick, both things to be able to get into the session and be ready to rock and roll. And from there, we'll be able to head to the racing action for the first of our heats here today, as drivers just getting one final chance to circulate around here and scope things out. Same conditions pretty much as we had for those qualifying runs here, as Dylan Burse goes for a wobble, puts it in the wall. A good measure. Gilliam coming up behind him as well, going to carry on here a little bit more tame, and that's what we would expect to see from these Ferrari 488 Evo GT3 cars. And just like that, it's about time for us to head to the grid. The other possibility is, yes, there's only 4 cars, Reese. We've got to go have a completely randomized grid here. We don't know exactly how things will turn out, and we do know now because that grid order has been set by iRacing, and it's going to be Dennis Gaderick who gets front row starts. That's the inside to turn 1. Caleb Hyde's on his outside. Dylan Burse, P3, and unfortunately Andrew Gilliam, in the scheme of things, fastest in quarterfinal qualifying. Going to have to start from P4 on the outside to turn 1.
So it is going to be a rolling start here behind the AI-controlled iRacing pace car. That's a Porsche 911 that is leading them away at the moment. And now they get things rolling. So they cannot pass the safety car before pit entry, obviously. And they have to wait for the green flag as well to get things going. You could get on the power at the apex of Murray's Corner, but do you want to go a little earlier? Do you want to go a little later and psych out your competitors, get a good run early?
Well, I can see here they are going nice and slow before we get the green signal. So the pace car is going to be in here, which means that green won't go till they get closer to Murray's Corner. At this stage, it looks actually about a 40-kilometre-an-hour roll towards the start procedure here, so it's going to be nice and steady. Caleb's actually going to want to be careful because he's currently ahead of Dennis, and that could result in an iRacing penalty if he stays ahead here when the green flag is given, possibly. So going to have to make sure he tucks back in behind Dennis just to be certain, I would have thought. We'll keep you posted on that, though, as we're about to get to the final corner, as they're all rolling in here to the final corner. I'm getting the feeling Dennis might actually have control over this because he wouldn't be going this slow if he didn't have to here. Get around Murray's Corner. Slowest we hopefully will see here today. And Caleb's going to have to be careful there because he's up ahead of Dennis. And they're going to get the green flag as they get to the start-finish line here. And these cars now have to dig their way out of the bottom of the rev range, but the first race is underway here, Reese, and it's side-by-side between Gaderick and Hyde towards turn number 1.
Slightly later on the brakes is Hydes, but he gives room to Gaderick on the inside. Gilliam comes out of the first corner last as Burse getting a good run early, and that is Hydes into the lead of the race. But it's a good run from Burse here. He's right on the back of Dennis Gaderick, giving him a little bump as they come across the rise up to Griffins. Want to try and protect the inside. Gaderick didn't do that. And flying up the inside goes Dylan Burse. Gaderick has to back out of it. He almost gets into the tyre barriers, and that looked like a little bit of a wall hit there for one of our cars.
And that's the risk here. Whilst in the real world, you might be able to make 2 wide work at Griffin's Bend. Just the way that it cambers in on that crown on the racing line, there's almost no hope of being able to hang it around the outside here on this scan of Mount Panorama, but they make it out of the cutting okay for the first time. Hydes with about 3 car lengths back to Burse here as they head for McPhillamy at speed. Tap of the brakes I saw from Burse as they all try and get these cars steadied. Gaderick is still in it there, not too far back, also about 2 car lengths off of Gilliam, who's third in the train still, who's tucked behind Burse as they come down through the dipper. Hyde's still hanging on, but he's looking like a couple of moments where the car's like pinching the brake almost there, but he's going to slide. Hyde's around.
And he just manages to go off the racing line. Everyone slips through, but the rear wing is now wonky on Caleb Hydes' machine. That is going to promote Dylan Burse into the lead. This is your top 3, all in the same frame. At the moment, it looks like Andrew Gilliam will transfer through with Dylan Burse, but I'll tell you what, Dennis Gaderick, he's taken a bit of time to get up to speed, but we'll see how quick his pace is when we get across the line next. On board with Gaderick as he chases down our top 2.
Yeah, it is certainly still 3 cars fighting for 2 in this race. Don't forget, Gilliam was fastest in that quarterfinal qualifying run. Gaderick right behind him, second fastest, but at the end of lap 1, it's half a second in the hands of Dylan Burse, which means Andrew Gilliam is going to have to maybe start thinking rearward rather than forward, but a little wide from Burse of the apex. Going to hurt the run off a held corner, and same for Gaderick there, not so great, which allows Gilliam to put himself basically, he was right in the middle of these 2 here.
Yeah, Gaderick, he had a really good run coming into Hell Corner, but the rear end got away from him at the apex. It looked like he had to have a couple of stabs at the steering. So now Across the top of the mountain, this is where we're going to see who really has their driving sorted. Gilliam got a really good exit coming out of Griffin's Bend, and he makes up so much time in the braking zone there. He is looking massively confident.
Gets that car more, doesn't put the car out as wide as Dylan Burst did on the entry to the cutting, I should say. And that's what seems to help him there. The car's not being asked to turn as much. It's not at as much of an angle. And so the front tyre's able to do more braking as a result. Spreads out a little bit, though, over the top of McPhillamy once again. But it's still a second between our top three. It looks like, unfortunately, Caleb Hydes has called it quits. And, in fact, must have had a second incident somewhere out there on track race, because there was a mechanical black flag next to his name. And with that said and done, he towed his way out of the race. No chance to get back into things here. Is down now to a straight 3 shootout.
Yeah, and then there were 3. It's a real shame for Caleb Hydes. I see him on my end on the Zoom feed. He looks a bit dejected. He is out of the event now. And old Burst is off the circuit there. He's in the grass. What on earth is going on there? Oh no, his sim froze just a little bit. So that's a little bit of a technical problem for Dylan Burst that has demoted him down to second. Could be potentially third here as Gaderick rounds him up.
Well, Gaderick's got one more lap to make something of this, well, opportunity, I guess you could really call it, more than anything else. Gilliam now might just have himself a free hand as they cross by the start-finish line there, halfway down the straight. Barney, the flag man here on iRacing, got the white flag in hand as Gaderick, all kinds of in the grass there on the exit of turn 1. The gap now out to 1.8 seconds to the race lead. And that might just have sealed his fate as well, unless we have more problems for Burst. Because, I mean, we just heard there, as you said, screen freeze of some kind for Dylan there. It's just kind of funny because I saw him going down the straight. All of a second, he's in the grass, and I see over that he's actually looking basically away from the car and track. He just had, no clue where he was at, and immediately signaling for help whilst trying to keep it going in a straight line, which he did.
Yeah, well, he's managed to maintain second so far. It's now going to be down to Dennis Gaderick to see if he can make the move here. But Burst has gotten right back on the pace here. Gilliam is jetting away. He knows that he's under no pressure here. Burst, I think, just focusing now on trying to keep Gaderick behind him.
Yep. There's no real need to go after Andrew Gilliam, and in Andrew Gilliam's case, no real need to push all that hard, but he'll certainly lock himself in if he can keep this nice and tidy. As you say, it's now on Dylan Burst to keep an eye on his rearview mirrors, get the exit off of Forest Elbow here, right, angles in, gets down onto the little groove that exists on that line. If you can keep it tight through the corner, pardon me. Looking at about 6, maybe 7/10 of a second the margin as they come down Collins Road. I think he'll be safe here because you can see Gaderick not really gaining relative to the leader, and Burst about steady as well. It would have to be one heck of a lunge here at the chase.
Yeah, that's too much time to make up on driving alone. He'd have to hope, would Gaderick, for another technical problem for Dylan Burst. But coming up to the final corner now, Andrew Gilliam, he started last in the 4 cars taking part in this race, and he will cross the line in first spot. Andrew Gilliam is through to the final, and it looks like Dylan Burst has managed to hold off Dennis Gaderick for second. Those are your 2 that will transfer through to the final race of the night. There's your official results then, Dan. Real shame for Caleb Hydes. If he hadn't had that spin, who knows where he would have ended up.
Certainly had the pace to be with these drivers, and unfortunately into hot on cold tyres at Forest Elbow. Thankfully doesn't take anyone else with him, which is good to see in some respects. Well, make of it what you can in that situation, I guess. Unfortunately, separate issue for him, unfortunately. Just confirms that he will be unable to be part of the action here on out. And so now, we just take one final moment to reset. We might need to hand back to David Haynes, see, might be chatting with Andrew Gilliam at this stage. But nevertheless, not too long now, we'll get set for the second of our semi-finals to wrap things up here in this stage of the afternoon.
Oh yeah, oh man, it is. It's going to be quite the event leading up to this. We keep our eye now on the Room 360 event space here at Queensland University of Technology. Some beautiful views of the Brisbane CBD from this spot here, and we really want to give a huge thanks here to QUT for allowing us to host this event here in this space. Really awesome to see the turnout here as well. Plenty of people on board here for the inaugural Motorsport Australia State Esports Championship here in Queensland.
Yeah, and I guess it's going to be this great question of, well, hopefully we'll see more state championship events like this, and where will it be next, and what will it look like as well? So many possibilities in terms of format and such, and I think that's a message there being put on one of the phones. Daniel Benefield there. I see you, Dan. Hello. Unfortunately, I can't quite read what's on the message there because you're a bit too far away from the camera. So well, I've said it. It's coming up to us, isn't it?
Oh no, Daniel Benefield, of course, a driver for your team, Drop Bear Motorsports, and it's looking like some. Oh yeah, hi Dan. There we go. Daniel Benefield, long-time competitor in Australian sim racing events. He took a couple of years break, but he came back to sim racing this year as we have another look at Mount Panorama Circuit. This is certainly shown once again to be the premier racetrack in the nation, Dan. I absolutely love this place.
I mean, to think that this is public roads for the whole year, and we close this off a couple of times a year for some marquee events. Just a bit of a background noise got me a bit flustered, but yeah, the fact that this was, and also the fact the history of the circuit conceived as public works exercise, and then they happened to decide that, well, we could make a racetrack out of it, and lo and behold, the tradition was begun. And the fact that, we get to see GT cars here in February. We see, touring cars across the year now in multiple different categories, with both TCR Australia being here, as well as the homegrown Holden Ford rivalry through the supercars. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, Reece. So many cars make their way here to the mountain.
GT3 Evos out on track. If you love racing about as much as I do, you're going to want to scan the QR code on the red A-frame over by the bar, where you can get a free ticket to QR Shannon's Speed Series at Queensland Raceway tomorrow. Normally the Sunday general admission tickets are $30. You can get one for free just for being here. So thank you so much, everyone who's come out. It's great to see all of you. And it's great to see the 4 drivers we've got for this semi-final. We've got Steen Ledger, Kenny Economos, Cody Deeth, and Hayden Sell. Well, Steen Ledger is right here. He's the highest seeded driver after qualifying in this semi-final. How are you feeling now?
Good. I think just play it safe, not getting caught in anything like watching the first one where some mistakes were made. Just keep it simple.
Fantastic. Best of luck. Over on the other side here, I've got Kenny Economos. How are you feeling ready for this semi-final? One step away from potentially being in the final 4 in the grand final.
Pretty good, mate. Just going to give it my best and just try and get in that top 2. That's the goal.
Heading over this side. Which one have I got on which rig here? Hayden Sell over here on rig number 2. You're setting up the sim to your own little personal preferences here, trying to get comfortable. Is that the aim for this short 3-lap race?
Yeah, just get as comfortable as I can and try and move forward a little bit.
Who's here cheering you on today?
Family, friends.
Shout out to his family and friends. And over on rig number 1 then, Cody Deeth. How are you feeling?
Confident. Hopefully we can get some pace out of the car now. Now I'm used to the setup and the track.
GT3 racing at Mount Panorama. Big slipstream down the straights. Can't pass over the top of the hill. What's your strategy when you go wheel to wheel?
Just going to try my best. Just try and send it when I can. Try and get the move done.
Well, we're just one more race away from the grand final, from the prestigious title, from the trophies, and from the prizes provided by Next Level Racing that will also be going out to our top 3. Make some noise for the drivers of semi-final number 2.
David, and thanks to everyone who was at the Room 360 event space supporting our drivers today. This is semi-final number 2. The top 2 from this one will also transfer through to the 7-lap final race. Here we go then. Dan Steenledger, Cody Deeth, Kenny Konomos, and Hayden Sell will be competing in this one, and it looks like we've already skipped on through practice. We are ready to look at the grid. What is the starting order going to be for this event? It looks like Deeth and Ledger are going to be on the front row, with Hayden Sell and Kenny Konomos behind them.
Yep, indeed, that will be our order there. As I can assure you that usually, well, can confirm that once we head to the footage here trackside, that those grid spots will definitely be filled. So I'll be curious to see how things go. Deeth and Ledger Deeth was a little bit further back in the quarterfinal qualifying stage of this one here. Steenledger on the outside, they're on turn 1. We'll see how he can go, and then whether Kenny Konomos can make things a little interesting here and potentially make his way through to the final. Kenny is in the yellow and black there, second row on the right side of the circuit. Cody Deeth there, white and black Ferrari. Steenledger, red and black Ferrari, leaving the purple and black Ferrari in the hands of Hayden Sell with those burnt orange rims, which I don't know if they go with or don't quite go with here.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see on that. But looks like they are staying much closer to the pace car than the drivers in our first semi-final did. And Cody Deeth carrying quite a bit of speed into Murray's corner as they get ready to await the call of the green flag. But Deeth isn't waiting for anybody. Away he goes, and the green flag flies for semi-final number 2. Deeth weaving to try and put some heat into the tyres as they go single file into the first corner. And out of them all, it actually looks like Deeth got one of the worst exits. Here comes Steenledger for a run at P1.
He's looking now, but he's going to have to go a long way around and beat Cody under brakes if he wants to lead on the exit of Griffin's Bend. The outside is not going to work. He just get it done beforehand, and no, he can't. So you'll see him jump on the brakes, tuck back in line as he can, thanks to Hayden Sell being a little bit further back as we go on board with Sell now here in the 3rd position as we make our way up towards the cutting for the first time in this second semi-final. All the drivers about middle of the road there as they then climb on out of tricky corner there. I think it's like a 1 in 6 gradient, I think it is there, and that corner in particular, which makes the exit, even in cars like this with traction control, so difficult as they then work their way across the mountain for the first time.
Well, it looks to me like a pretty clean start to this race so far, but touch wood, we are about to go into the most difficult part of the circuit, braking and turning all the way down the hill, and it looks like it is a race for second at the moment. Deeth, after having gotten that lightning start, is managing to hold on to a good gap, but he would have seen what happened to Caleb Hydes in the first semi-final race. He'll be keeping a close eye on how the rear end of that car is doing. But looking back here from Steenledger at Hayden Sell, part of 9-5 Sim Sports, one of the premier teams in the Australian sim racing community. Looks like a slipstream battle going on down Conrod Straight. We are about to complete this first lap of 3. And at the moment, it seems like things have settled into a rhythm, but anything can go wrong at Mount Panorama, and it usually does.
Yeah, even with only 3 laps to sort things out in this race, if anything, that just ratchets up the pressure if you're not quite going to be home safe. Now, pardon me, a couple of times there, I wanted to say something, had to pause, but crucially, I wanted to point out there on that first lap at least, as we jump back on board with Hayden Sell in 3rd place, and you see here, certainly busy working the wheel, but Steenledger was about 5.5 tenths behind Cody Deeth on the exit of Forest Elbow, and the gap climbed a little bit on the way up the straight because he had a bit of a bad run, but the gap then shrunk back down to just over 4 tenths of a second. So we're looking at maybe only 2 tenths of a second gain just on draft alone here today, Reece. So that really tells me that if anyone's going to try and make a move down Conrod Straight, you have to have a much better exit off of the elbow than the car ahead of you, or be right on their gearbox if the run happens to be pretty dead set even. So far, though, Steen Ledger, a better opening half to this second lap. He's really closing the gap down to Cody Deeth here as we come across the top again.
Yeah, it seems like Deeth is a little bit more confident over the top, though. You can see that the gap is extending just a little as they make their way up to Skyline. And I think curb usage for all of these cars shows that all of the drivers are having a nice time keeping the cars stable. But down into the braking zone for Forest Elbow here, the cars can very easily twitch when you get onto the brakes. Braking and turning at the same time is something that you have to do in just about any car around Mount Panorama. And once again, Deeth with an excellent exit. Seems like it's going to be a race between him and Ledger at the moment. And Ledger getting a little whisper of a slipstream coming down Conrod, but again, it's not quite enough to overcome Cody Deeth. However, it does seem that Steen is safe for second spot. Hayden Sell and Kenny Konomos are battling hard behind, and it seems like they're not able to catch up to the top two.
Yeah, by the looks of things, Hayden and Kenny not pushing things too hard here in those positions, but just don't quite have the pace at the moment to go with Cody or Steen as they're on the final lap of semi-final 2 now. Top 2 fairly even with their exits. Kenny, a big wiggle there in the background, able to keep it pointing in the right direction though as they climb Mountain Straight for the final time here. Gap slowly shrinking, but again, it will not be enough for Steen Ledger here. We'll see though, maybe try something. At the same time, Reese, he's safe here. He just needs to finish the race. P2 will be enough, but he's close on the way out of Griffin's Bend.
Yeah, it's this first half of the lap where he really seems to have it sorted out. He makes up so much time coming up to the cutting, but as soon as they get to this section, Cody Deeth has a bit of an edge. He's just able to carry more speed through the middle of the corner through these left-hand turns across the top.
This part of the track, if you get it just right, you can pretty much go flat out to the crest there on entry to McPhillamy Park. But if you're not quite on the money, you will have to do a bit of a lift as you go through the grate. That's the one spot in particular there. All in all, seems to be about the status quo with Deeth, as you said, slightly quicker. Although that time there, a little slower off of the dip up as they come down to Forest Elbow here. The gap just only increasing, unfortunately, for those guys. Steen there, I think maybe a little willing to brush the wall on the exit of the elbow here as he's got the gap to 0.4 of a second as we come down Conrod, and he'll follow the toe best he can here. That Cody's car is punching the hole in the air here, Reese, but again, too far back, should be able to settle in here and solidify with second place as Hayden and Kenny, they're back there, but unfortunately it's going to take a big incident to change things as we've got one corner left to go here in semi-final 2.
Yeah, well, unless there's a huge lunge from Steen Ledger, and there is not, it looks like Cody Deeth is going to be the one coming away with the win in semi-final number 2 here in the Motorsport Australia State Esports Championships for Queensland. The audience applauding behind as Deeth takes his victory, and that is the end of it. Cody Deeth and Steen Ledger will transfer through to the final coming up next. Just 0.3 the gap at the end, and a good battle between Hayden Sell and Kenny Konomos for the final 2 spots. We won't be seeing them again tonight, but they had a great run through the event. Good on both of them. And, now we gear up to see whether or not Deeth or Ledger can come away with the victory, battling against Andrew Gilliam and Dylan Burse.
Indeed.
Ledger will transfer through to the final race of the night, the grand final, where there are trophies for the podium, there are prizes for our podium, and of course, the first Motorsport Australia Queensland Esports State Championship title will be awarded in just one race time. Our final 4 are Andrew Gilliam, Steen Ledger, Cody Deeth, and Dylan Burse.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Well, now things start gearing up for the final. Dan, this is going to be majorly intense as David Haynes gives us a little tour. He actually cleans up very nicely, doesn't he? We usually see him with his blue hair down and wearing some shirt with a weird graphic design on it, but he's gotten all formal for this event. Nice to see.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, I haven't had a chance to meet Dave yet since I'm stationed down in Melbourne, and David, they're up in Queensland at this event here at Room 360 at QUT. But yeah, not too far away from the final race of the evening and the final.
Up to the rigs, please. Andrew Gilliam, Steen Ledger, Cody Deeth, and Dylan Burse. We've had 3-lap semi-finals, and our grand final will be a 7-lap affair. Will we see more of the tactics of the slipstreaming come in as they compete in the grand final? So, Cody Deeth, you're right back in the same rig again, back into the same groove. Are you in your rhythm, in your element?
I'm getting pretty close now. I should be good for this one. Hopefully we can get away with a win.
Dylan Burse over on rig number 2. How are you feeling?
I don't know, hopefully better than the last race. That was a bit dodgy, what happened there, but we got through, so I'm just glad to be in the final, eh? I mean, trying to get a result out of it. So.
You're in the final 4, go well. Over here, I find Steen Ledger. You've worked your way through the online qualifying, through the qualifying here, through the semi-final, and into the final 4 in the grand final.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Just keep it safe now, I reckon, and make sure we get to finish it.
That's a good strategy. Congratulations and go well. And our final driver in the grand final, over on rig number 4, he was top seed. He won his semi-final. He's through into the grand final. Andrew Gilliam, how are you going to go about this?
Hopefully I start on pole for this one. I got a bit shafted in the last one, but yeah, I just need to slot into a rhythm. It's a bit of a longer race, so we've got a bit more time to get into a rhythm, make smart decisions, make some good smart passes, and have a good battle.
Yeah, 7 laps for this one. Qualifying should be, and the grid less important than it was in those semi-finals. Well, it is our final 4, and let's make some noise one last time for our grand final drivers. Andrew Gilliam, Steen Ledger, Cody Deeth, and Dylan Burse.
All right. Away we go then for the final here. All 4 of our drivers coming on into the session. Steen Ledger and Cody Deeth already in the server and doing a couple of laps out there just to prepare for this final 7-lap race, Dan Yeaman. I'm looking forward to seeing who comes away with the prizes here tonight. Remember, they're racing for some next level racing rigs.
They are indeed. And this will be a good one, I think, because 7 laps is still fairly short and sharp, but it's enough to potentially see drivers who perhaps overwork the tyres a little bit too much and struggle for a lap or 2 until they can get them back in order. All the same, it's still a sprint race. You've got to be on your toes every single corner of this one here, and you still can't afford to allow yourself to fall behind because you're not going to get a lot of time to be able to make things up if something does go wrong.
Yep, a little bit more time to make things up. It's definitely going to be a bit more of an endurance race, it could be said. I suppose, in the grand scheme of things, 7 laps around Mount Panorama is still very much a sprint, but for the purposes of this event, it's going to be the longest one of the night. Remember, of course, that the grid is going to be done by iRating of the drivers. Now, if you're unfamiliar with iRacing, iRating is basically a rating of how quote-unquote good you are as a driver, your relative finishing position in races that you do that are officially sanctioned by iRacing on the service. So, you finish further up a field, you get more points for your iRating. So at the moment, Cody Deeth has the highest iRating in the field, and I suppose that means, Dan, he's going to be starting on pole position.
Yep, he should. And we'll get confirmation of that here now. And No, looks like my expectations
Deeth is on
are...
pole.
Deeth is on pole, yes, but my expectations have been slightly twisted in that Andrew Gilliam, who has the lowest rating of everyone, but that's not indicative of his pace because, racing in unofficial leagues and such. But nevertheless, Andrew Gilliam going to be on the outside for the run to turn one, and in behind on the second row, it'll be Dylan Burst on the inside, Steen Ledger on the outside. That is how they will set up for this, our final race of this event here at the Motorsport Australia Esports Queensland State Championship. 7 more laps of racing here at the Mount Panorama Circuit left to decide who walks away our victor here for this event. Cody Deeth in the top left of your screen, Dylan Burst the top right of your screen, Steen Ledger the bottom left, Andrew Gilliam the bottom right. Anyone potentially stand out as a possible winner here, Reese, or are we entirely going to have to leave this one up to a bit of a dice roll?
Yeah, I think we're going to have to leave it to fate because this is going to be a very close field. Andrew Gilliam the fastest on 1 lap pace, but we'll see what Cody Deeth can do here off the front row. Look at that. Again, he goes early as the green flag flies for the final here in the Motorsport Australia Esports Queensland State Championships. Gilliam protects the inside for second from Steen Ledger, but he goes deep. He is off the track, coming out of Hell Corner and right at the back. Oh dear. That is not the start that Andrew Gilliam would have wanted. Cody Deeth leading by an effective mile at this stage. It is a race for second between Steen Ledger and Dylan Burst. What can Andrew Gilliam do to catch up?
There's half a chance maybe he can get back into this here, but it's going to be a long way back as on board we go with Dylan Burst looking at Steen Ledger ahead and Cody Deeth almost a second clear now as they climb up into the cutting for the first time. And that was unfortunate for Andrew Gilliam. He was definitely in quick to Hell
He's in
Corner.
the wall again.
Oh, dear. So, not
Just tapped
done.
the wall out of the cutting.
Yeah, not done just yet, but maybe pushing a little bit too hard. And now, unfortunately, starting to pay the price here as these walls, solid concrete, not a lot of mercy left if you hit them in a car like this.
No, certainly not. So Gilliam's got a lot of work to do if he wants to be eligible for any of the prizes on offer here tonight. After such a good job in the quarterfinals, seems that it's fallen apart for him a bit here at the start of the grand final. But Cody Deeth on pole position and leading away here. Tiny bit of slipstream could be picked up by Steen Ledger. Not too sure though. It's going to be interesting to see whether or not Steen will be able to catch him up. It seems that Dylan Burst has also lost some time. He might have had a mistake coming down the mountain towards Forest Elbow. You see that he and Gilliam are much closer now for third. So a top 3 could still be on the cards for Gilliam.
Yeah, don't quite count him out just yet because Burst has dropped back a long way here on this opening lap. As we see here. That black and yellow machine that Burst is running here for the final event, closing right up inside 6/10, almost half a second here at the end of lap number 1 of 7. And thankfully this time Andrew doesn't make that same mistake he did on the opening lap, so able to get the run up Mountain Straight as he would like here to start lap 2.
Right, things calming down a little bit. Seems like the race for the lead not quite on at the moment. Deeth still holding on by a couple of seconds from Steen Ledger here as they make their way up to the cutting for the second time. Deeth's lead is 1.3 seconds or near enough. What can Ledger do to overcome him? Deeth's last lap was 2:04.5. Meanwhile, no one else could get below a 2:06 on lap 1. So it seems that they're going to have to wait for the cars to get into their rhythm, for the tyres to get up to temperature. You see that Cody Deeth is pushing so hard across the top of the mountain, actually dipping a wheel into the grass coming out of McPhillamy. We haven't seen that yet tonight.
Yeah, haven't been pushing quite that hard. And with the quarterfinal qualifying laps, you have to keep it within the track limits. Though for these races, you can afford to be a little bit more free with the limits, but only adjust, given that going over that curb into the grass in McPhillamy Park, you could easily see the car spit you into the wall on the other side of the track there and make for a very messy run down the skyline out of control. But so far, haven't seen any of that, thankfully. As down Conroy Straight this second time, Dylan Burse up to 7/10 clear of Andrew Gilliam there in fourth race. But still very much going to be a fight between these two. Gap at the front, 1.3, 1.2 seconds here. The owners actually know it's coming down a little quicker there. That's some small mistake, I think, for Deeth at the final corner.
Yeah, potentially. He did run wide at Murray's, so the gap is now under a second. It's 8/10 on the way out of Hell Corner, and you can see how much Deeth is weaving here, trying to break the slipstream. I don't always think that that's a particularly useful thing to do, because you end up costing yourself time there, making your car travel a slightly longer distance. You might break the slipstream, but you could end up costing yourself even more in terms of track position if you do that a little too egregiously. Then you are allowed to do it as long as the car is not too close to you or alongside. Regardless, it seems that Steen Ledger has made up some valuable time here in his pursuit of victory.
Yep, and it's come at just about the right time. Puts him on that hint of a slipstream, although still got work to do here as we'll go on board with Steen across McPhillamy Park here, and you can see use the entry curb, use the exit curb, then get back to the left, open up Skyline for the descent down the S's, and then you have to make sure to not go too fast here, which looks to have done the job nicely, but a lot of steering lock to get it in at the S's, and then continue the run down to Forest Elbow, up against the walls, left and right, and then get it in there, and you follow those, as you said earlier, Rest, that inside line, you follow the apex wall win a fair way there. And then finally work your way out into Conroy Street. You can see gap just under 8/10 of a second, and it's coming down slowly, but nowhere near enough at this stage.
Yeah, it seems that on outright pace, Deeth and Ledger are so similar that it's going to take a mistake from Deeth to really bring Steen into contention here. Out of the chase, down to the final corner where Deeth ran wide on the last lap. Does the same thing happen again? He almost gets onto the grass, but he does hook up the apex this time. So across the line, the gap has actually come down a bit further. It's down to 0.6 of a second now. And I tell you what, Steen Ledger's really starting to ramp up here. Once the tyres are up to temperature, it seems he is the man to beat as we check out the battle for third once more. Burst still holding off Gilliam, but not by much.
Gap there closing to 0.4 of a second. As back at the front, gap under half a second. Almost to me feels like Cody Deeth taking it a little conservatively here, and this is actually something he might need to do. Look after the tyres a little bit here, don't overheat them, so that he's got something left to really defend with if it comes to it, and Steen closes up even further, whereas Steen's got to be on the attack here. There has to be absolutely no letting up of his pace if he wants a chance at the P1 position. You can see on that particular time, not a great run out of the cutting. He's lost about 0.2 of a second at the lowest speeds, exiting and getting up to pace again, although gets back. It was very close, though, for Deeth, the exit of the great.
Oh, it was. He ended up, I think, even clipping the wall just a little bit. He's got to take care here. It seems that while Deeth was pushing hard on the first lap, and that really helped him out, now that the tyres are up to temperature, now that we're into the rhythm of this race, having just passed the halfway point, now Steen Ledger is starting to creep up, and look at the concentration on Steen's face here as they exit onto Conrod Straight. There is the weave again from Cody Deeth, and Ledger ends up being wise to it, follows him, keeps himself in that hole in the air that's being punched by Deeth's Ferrari. The gap keeps coming down and down as they make their way to the chase, and there's a change for third behind. Andrew Gilliam is now ahead of Dylan Burse, and oh my goodness, that is Dylan Burse in the wall at the chase. Has something gone wrong between these two?
We'll have to see if we can find out. Well, in fact, I will go and find out for myself, I think, as we keep our eye on the lead. Again, a bad run for Cody Deeth in the final couple of corners. Steen Ledger, with 3 laps to go, is right on his gearbox, and I'm not impressed by Dylan Burse. He intentionally lost control. Well, unless
it was another screen freeze.
Yeah, but the steering wheel suddenly went left and right violently on the middle of the Conrod Straight. Yeah.
Well, lead
We'll talk about that
battle
another time.
is close. Yep, lead battle is close. Deeth defensive coming into Griffins. A little bit of oversteer on the exit. And now Steen Ledger has the run that he needs, but he's on the outside for the cutting. How close does he get? He's on the racing line. Deeth defensive again.
And again, 2.5 laps and then a little bit more to sort this out. So for Steen Ledger, he probably doesn't need to be completely on top of it. At the very least, start probing Cody Deeth. Start trying to figure out, are there spots he can maybe force a moment from that black and white Ferrari? For me, these two guys are going to be really close on pace. It's more about who's worked their tyres to a point where they're starting to struggle, because even though we're only 4.5 laps into a race, these cars, they will start slipping and sliding the tyres if you're really pushing 110%. And that might just be the case there for Deeth. That, or he's just making absolutely certain that his runs off of Murray's and Hell Corner are good, as look how close they push it there on the exit of Forest Elbow.
Yeah, that was super close. In fact, I think Ledger caught the wall ever so slightly. Man, this weaving is starting to get a bit interesting here for Cody Deeth. He's trying desperately to keep Ledger behind him, but as long as that Ferrari is behind his, then the gap will decrease. Down into the chase. It seems like Ledger is the one keeping it together a little better at this stage. It'll be the start of the penultimate lap here. And have a look at how much time Ledger makes up in the braking zone. Wow, he was deep. Deeth, meanwhile, just backing it a little bit and probably focusing on the exit. So across the line, the gap is under 0.4 of a second. And once again, it's going to be mountain straight. It's going to be the slipstream. Deeth gets a slightly better run out of the corner. He is instantly trying to weave to break the draft. If I was Ledger, I'd just sit in a straight line and let Deeth weave and cost himself time.
Yeah, just sort of this discussion of the thought of, do you gain more from following the slipstream if he's weaving across the track, or is it better off to just sit tight and run the normal line and not have to worry about it? Nevertheless, through Griffin's Bend, not close enough to make anything of it. But to me, it really looks like Deeth, it's Murray's corner now that is really vulnerable, because it didn't really seem like Ledger was in very deep compared to what he normally would be. We've seen Deeth a couple of times as having moments at Murray's, so maybe suggestive that, just not quite able to get the car pulled up how he wants, and so that's where the time gain is. But they are nose to tail across the top of the mountain here into McPhillips Park. Ledger just a little bit of understeer, I think, there in the draft, the air, and then a little bit loose. He comes down the edge. That is very hot.
Very deep indeed. How did he manage to pull that up? I have no idea.
Oh, boy. And what that means now is that gives Cody a bit of a breather here on this second last lap of the final. Both of them, again, right out to the wall there on the exit of Forest Elbow. Not quite touching it. And the weaving starts once again. Ledger will follow for as much of a straight line advantage as he can get here, Reese. But then settle in for the chase one more time.
All right. No weaving from Deeth this time around. And Ledger keeping himself still in the margin he needs. Tiny bit of oversteer on the exit, but it seems to have worked out well for Steen. So, final corner. Who nails it? Ideally, both of them. And it seems that that is indeed the case. All right then, white flag. It all comes down to this. 6.2 kilometres of racing to go in the Motorsport Australia Esports Queensland State Championships. It is Cody Deeth versus Steen Ledger here in the final. And Deeth is defending like an animal.
And I think he'll be safe here. Slightly better exit. Didn't use as much grass on the exit of turn 1. Ledger will close up a little bit here. But as long as they both get through here normally, I think we'll keep this order until we get to Conrod Straight. And this is going to be critical. We saw what happened to Steen last time at McPhillips Park, and the S's is in too hot and struggling with front end grip underneath the rear end of Cody's Ferrari here. On board looking back at Steen here as we climb out the cutting the final time. Gap is close between them, but steady for the moment.
Yeah, the gap is down to 0.3, just a little bit under. Steen is as close as he's ever been across the top here. How deep does he go into the S's? It's all about the exit from McPhillips Park across Skyline. It seems that Deeth has carried a little more speed there and increased the gap by just a few hundredths. but Steen Ledger is rounding him up ever so slightly through the dipper. It's all going to come down to the exit from Forest Elbow and the slipstream down Conrod Straight. Oh, Ledger just kicking the rear end out on the way into the elbow. That might have done it.
And he's a little bit far back, and he grabs the wall there on the broadcast shot as well. Gap going up rather than down, and I think that might have just done it for Cody Deeth. They're still going to get through the chase in Murray's corner to call it official here, but at 0.8 of a second as we come over the crest on Conrod, he will be safe from coming into the chase here. From any attack, that is. It's now in his hands to bring it home here. Just 2 corners left and make it 1 already as they come on out of the chase here, and just needs to pull it up here. And even with some of the moments he's had here, I think he will be safe. And indeed, that looks nice and tidy for Cody Deeth as he rounds Murray's corner. And a moment there for him as we crown our first Motorsport Australia Esports Queensland State Champion. Cody Deeth, congratulations.
Yeah, well done. He wasn't phased that entire time. Just that little moment at Murray's on the second lap or third lap, and that was pretty much it. Well, those are your results then. 0.8 was the gap at the end, but my goodness, Steen Ledger gave him one heck of a fight. That was awesome to see. It would have been interesting to see what Andrew Gilliam could have done in the midst of all of that. But unfortunately, he just wasn't able to get close to them after his moment on lap 1. And Dylan Burse, well, he ends up retiring from the final, but still managed to make it into the final, which really says something for his driving ability. That is going to bring to an end the proceedings on the track. We wait for David Haynes to have a chat with our winner, Cody Deeth.
Well, here we are, the winner of the first ever Motorsport Australia in-person esports event, the first Queensland Esports State Champion, taking home a trophy, taking home some prizes, and in a beautiful location here at QUT, in front of a crowd. Cody Deeth, how do you feel?
Oh, just amazing, man. I can't believe that. Like, the whole week I've been trying to get good at the car, get good at the track, and it's paid off. I'm speechless.
Longest race of the evening, 7 laps, and for all 7 of those, Steen Ledger was within a second. He was in your mirrors, he was in the rear vision camera, he was putting that pressure on you, but you did not crack. You are the winner.
Oh, man. I'm mentally exhausted after that one. It was like, I can't swear, but I was so far out. The amount of pressure he was putting on me, like, I was about to crack. It was that hard.
Well, congratulations. Big crowd here, all cheering you on, clapping you across that finish line. Podium ceremony coming up in just a little bit, so don't go too far. But thank you to everyone who's joined on Motorsport Australia's platforms, on SimSpeed, on the NLR, everyone watching in Queensland, in Australia, and around the world. And of course, a big thank you to everybody here at QUT Gardens Point who have witnessed history, the inaugural Queensland Esports State Champion, Cody Deeth.
Conclusion here, the Motorsport Australia Esports Queensland State Championships. Big congratulations to Cody Deeth, Steen Ledger, and Andrew Gilliam, our top 3 in the final. They'll be coming away with next level racing prizes, and second and third will get an HF8 haptic feedback gaming pad as well. How good. I'm Reese Gardner, Dan Yeaman with me in the commentary box. Big thanks to Jay Kennedy behind the scenes making all of this happen, and to David Haynes on site at Room 360 at Queensland University of Technology. Big thanks to you guys as well for helping to put this event on. We're SimSpeed TV. We'll see you again next time.